Okay.
Okay, cool. Is that alright? Thanks. Okay, so get started. And just thought, like last time, I could kind of a general introduction first, and then we can go into like the main topic, which I thought we could speak about the two truths. So last time we were talking about emptiness a little bit, and that comes into the topic of the two truths. So and last week some people asked to kind of elaborate more about that. So I thought I'd uh, try and give a talk about the two truths. Now, uh, generally, to give like a general introduction, we ourselves and all the people in the world are seeking happiness and wanting to avoid suffering, and that's kind of a given in the sense that we define feelings of happiness as feelings that we want to attain, and then we've defined feelings of suffering as feelings we want to get rid of or want to avoid. So uh, that doesn't need kind of much justification. It's just the way things are. We're all seeking different things, different ways of making ourselves happy. Now, within happiness, you can distinguish two types of happiness. You have happiness related to the body, and then happiness related to the mind. So, um, and within those, which one's more important? Well, you can see that some people have a lot of happiness of related to the body, like they have a lot of they have the really nice food, nice clothes, um, you know, uh, everything is the best quality. Yet they have a lot of suffering in their mind, like they have depression or they anxiety, they have a lot of fear. Uh, you have that, like you see it often in like Hollywood celebrities, things like that. They have everything in terms of material happiness, in terms of happiness related to the body, but they have a lot of internal suffering. And then at the same time, you can have people who have very little in terms of material happiness. They have a nice house. In somewhere like India, you have people with a very low standard of living, but within that they have some contentment and some inner happiness. So um, generally, you can say that mental happiness is more important than physical happiness. When you have physical happiness but mental unhappiness, the mental unhappiness overrides the physical happiness. Like in case of the Hollywood celebrities, like they have all these things, but they're not getting an overall kind of state of happiness from it. Whereas the if you have a lot of if you don't have a lot of physical happiness, a lot of material wealth and so on, but you have an inner state of peace, then that is enough to bring some kind of overall satisfaction and happiness. So from that you can see that the mental happiness is much more important. Uh, so this is where Buddhism comes in. So in Buddhism we uh, we say we're going to look inwards and try and make ourselves happy, temporary and ultimately, and other people happy. So uh, this with Buddhism, we're going to recognize that the most important thing is our minds. Our minds are what we use to make ourselves happy, what we can use to attain our goals. So this is something that's even mentioned in the Hinayana Sutras. It says the mind is the creator of everything, and the mind, all things are in the phenomenon, all things are in the nature of the mind, and the mind creates everything. The mind goes before everything. So this emphasis on the mind is like a theme in Buddhism. So we're going to not perhaps put so much, as if we're going to practice Buddhism, we're perhaps not going to put so much emphasis on attaining material happiness, but we're going to focus on our inner peace and our inner state of mind, and use that to bring ourselves happiness, bring other people happiness. So that's kind of a general introduction to what we're doing in Buddhism. And so now, what does this, like last week we talked a lot about studying and we talked about a lot of intellectual things. We like a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas. What does this have to do with making ourselves happy, making other people happy? Well, it's generally this is the nature of the path in Buddhism. You talk about hearing, contemplation, and listening. This is something that's hearing, contemplation, meditation. Sorry, these are like 3 stages in the Buddhist kind of tradition of mental development, the Buddhist path. So last week we said that when you're just trying to understand things, when you've got kind of a general idea but it hasn't really hit you, you haven't said aha yet, that's like just getting a general idea of things is like the hearing stage. And then when you're analyzing it, when you're thinking about it, that's and trying to understand it, that's the stage of contemplation. And then finally, once you've understood the topic, the 4 truths, the 2 truths, whatever, and when you meditate on and familiarize yourself with it again and again, that's the stage of meditation. Now it says hearing in the text for this first stage, but it's not just talking about sitting down and listening to Dharma talks. In a Sangha's text, the Yogacarya Bhumi, it talks about in the Sangha's text, as a Yogacarya Bhumi, it talks about what does it mean what does it mean by hearing? It means with a liking for the Buddha's teachings, memorizing, retaining, and reciting, and so forth. So it's a lot. It says hearing, but it covers a lot of activities. So when we hear a Dharma talk, that's hearing. When we go home and we read the book, and that's hearing. When we try and bring it to mind and remember from what was said the day before, what we read the week before, that all comes under hearing. It says hearing. This is one Sanskrit word, but it has this kind of technical meaning. You get this a lot in Buddhism. You have a word that has a equivalent in normal parlance, in normal speech, and then in the Buddhist text, it has a context and a kind of slightly different meaning. So this is what Asanga's explaining in his text here. So you have this sequence of 3, the hearing, contemplation, and meditation, and they're all dependent on each other. You can't have one without the other. You need all 3 is one way of saying that. So in text attributed to Maitreya called Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, he says, because of this, the yogi's meditation is meaningful. Because of this, the Sugata's teachings are meaningful. If hearing was enough to see the meaning, meditation would be meaningless. If meditation without hearing were enough, the Sugata's teaching would be meaningless. So he's saying that there's a need for meditation and there's a need for study and for this hearing as well. You can't just study and attain realizations, attain some kind of inner peace. You have to go and meditate. And at the same time, you can't just go and meditate straight away. You need to understand what you're going to meditate on. Otherwise, it doesn't really go anywhere. So that's kind of why in this tradition that we have here, the tradition of Lama Tsongkhapa, which we practice in this center, that our teachers practice, they have so much emphasis on this study. It's all comes into hearing, and it's all like a prelude or a foundation to meditate on. It's not just all this talk that doesn't really go anywhere. It's ultimately to be meditated on. So this is kind of like a feature of the Kadam lineage. So the Tsongkhapa's teachings kind of extend the previous Kadampa teachings of Atisha and Drontompa and so on. So in the Kadampa, in the Kadampas, which was a long time ago, before Lama Tsongkhapa, they had this kind of emphasis on hearing and contemplation and meditation that are not separate from each other, and they're not just unrelated to each other. Okay, so that's kind of an introduction, and I thought I'd just try and see if the slide works. Get the slide going. Okay, so got okay, there we are, two truths. So I put the now I have a dictionary that does Tibetan and Chinese, so I put the Chinese there, but I can't read Chinese, so if I'm wrong, then please correct me, okay? Like, so in that's like the introduction slide. Oh, is it? Okay. So now, can you see okay?
Yep.
Is it right? So if we're going to talk about the true truths, well, what's the source for the for the two truths? Like, does it have a source in the Buddha's teachings, and or is it something that people just made up? Well, it does talk about the two truths in the Buddha's teachings. You have the clearest kind of source that you have is this sutra called the Sutra of Meeting Father and Son, and I put there's a Chinese title and the Korean title there, and it says the one thus gone has realized the two of conventional and ultimate truths. All phenomena are exhausted in the two of ultimate and conventional truths. So that just means that there's you have these two truths. One's called conventional truth and one's called ultimate truth. And there's no other third possibility. All phenomena, all things that we can know, they're either a conventional truth or an ultimate truth. So that's all that's talking about there. And then also in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, you have obviously a lot of talk about emptiness. where does it specifically mention the two truths? Well, you have this statement in the 25,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom that says, don't see the bodhisattva as don't see the bodhisattva as ultimately existing in the way that they exist. Something like that. It's hard to kind of translate. It basically means, the bodhisattva exists, but don't see them as existent would be perhaps a better way to translate that. It means that the bodhisattva exists conventionally, but they don't exist ultimately. So don't see them as existing ultimately. That part of the Perfection of Wisdom is said to teach the two truths in that way. When you have this text by Maitreya called Abhisamaya Alamkara, and in that Ornament for Clear Realizations, and that text points out which parts of the Perfection of Wisdom teach which topics. And so the one that, according to Maitreya, that teaches the two truths is this the bodhisattva exists, but don't see him as existing ultimately. That one part of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. Okay, so that's the oh, not that one.
Does anyone exist ultimately?
Nothing exists ultimately.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that a bit later on. But basically, in the final school of Buddhism, and we say nothing exists ultimately. Okay. Now, so it's in the scriptures. We have this reference to the two truths in the scriptures. Now, what about in the Indian tradition of Buddhism? So in the treatises written by the great scholars. Well, yes, you have a lot of commentary and a lot of detail about the two truths. The main one, exponent of the two truths is Nagarjuna, this one in the picture here. Now, Nagarjuna wrote a lot of different texts on Sutra and Tantra, and the main one is this one here. It's called Mula Madhyamaka Karika, or in English it's Fundamental Text on Wisdom, and it's the Chinese name and the Korean names there. Now so here you have this kind of succinct summary by Nagarjuna. The teaching of the Buddha relies on the two truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth. This is very kind of famous stanza of his text. And just to say something else, Nagarjuna and Asanga, we talked about Asanga before when we were talking about the meaning of hearing. They're called the two charioteers, or the two forerunners. They were both prophesied by the Buddha, and they both trailblazed their own kind of system. So with Nagarjuna, he trailblazed, or he founded the school of Madhyamaka, of middle way philosophy. And then Asanga, he founded the school of Yogacara, or Chittimatra, the mind-only school. And another way to think about Nagarjuna is that within the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the most kind of famous and profound teaching of the Buddha, you have a hidden meaning and a manifest meaning. The hidden meaning is the stages of the path, so the different grounds and paths of bodhisattvas. That's not really talked about in the actual words of Perfection of Wisdom, but it's in there in a kind of secret way, in a hidden way. And the hidden meaning is brought out by Maitreya. Maitreya's texts Abhismayalankara, the ornament for clear realization. And the explicit meaning, which is emptiness, is taught by Nagarjuna in his texts. So you have, in Nagarjuna's text, you have this main one, the fundamental text in wisdom, and you have related that you have 5 other texts, which are like branches of that text, like supplements to that text. So Nagarjuna is important not only because he founded this school of middle way philosophy, but because he taught extensively on the explicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. Okay. Is there any questions there? No? Okay, we'll move on a bit. So here we have in the Two Truths, the first one we're going to talk about is ultimate truth. So in Sanskrit, it's